Have you ever noticed that two women can go through the exact same divorce, and yet, years later, they seem like completely different people? One spends years wondering what she did wrong, struggling to trust herself again. The other somehow becomes calmer, more confident, more emotionally secure, and more deeply connected to who she really is. The surprising part is that the divorce itself didn't create that difference. It simply revealed something that had been quietly developing beneath the surface all along. And according to attachment theory, understanding that difference might completely change the way you think about heartbreak, healing, and even yourself. Most people think of divorce as a story about loss, the loss of a partner, the loss of a future that once felt certain, sometimes even the loss of identity. Society often treats divorce as if it's proof that something failed, but relationship psychology tells a more complicated story. While divorce is undeniably painful, it can also become a powerful turning point, not because pain magically makes people stronger, but because pain has a way of exposing emotional patterns that were easy to ignore when life felt predictable. Attachment theory helps explain why this happens. From our earliest relationships, we develop expectations about love, safety, closeness, and ourselves. These expectations don't just disappear when we become adults. They quietly influence who we trust, how we handle conflict, what we tolerate, and even how we react when someone pulls away or comes closer. Many people don't realize these patterns exist until a relationship begins to break apart. Suddenly, emotions become overwhelming. Old fears seem to come alive, and reactions that once felt manageable become impossible to ignore. For some women, divorce activates deep attachment wounds. If they've spent years believing that love must be earned through constant sacrifice, they may blame themselves for everything that happened. If they've learned that abandonment is always around the corner, every unanswered text, every argument, and every emotional distance during the marriage may have reinforced that fear. The end of the relationship doesn't simply hurt because the marriage ended. It hurts because it touches older emotional experiences that may have existed long before they ever met their spouse. But here's where something remarkable can happen. Not every woman stays trapped inside those old attachment patterns. Some begin asking questions they had never allowed themselves to ask before. Why did I ignore my own needs for so long? Why was I afraid to set boundaries? Why did I confuse keeping the peace with keeping the relationship alive? Those questions aren't signs of bitterness. They're signs of growing self-awareness. And self-awareness is one of the strongest predictors of lasting emotional growth. Research in relationship psychology suggests that secure attachment isn't something people are simply born with forever. While early experiences matter, attachment patterns can change through healthy relationships, therapy, supportive communities, and intentional self-reflection. Psychologists sometimes call this earned security. It means someone who once felt anxious, fearful, or emotionally disconnected can gradually build a more secure way of relating to themselves and others. That's why some women seem almost unrecognizable a few years after divorce. They aren't pretending the pain never happened. They aren't stronger because they never cried. They're stronger because they stopped organizing their entire identity around someone else's. Seize approval. Instead of asking, how do I get my old life back? They begin asking a far more transformative question. Who am I when I'm no longer trying to become who someone else needed me to be? That shift doesn't happen overnight. In fact, the beginning often looks incredibly messy. There are moments of grief that arrive without warning. Ordinary places suddenly carry extraordinary memories. A familiar song, an empty chair at dinner, or signing paperwork with a different last name can bring emotions rushing back. Healing rarely moves in a straight line, and attachment theory reminds us that this is completely understandable. Our attachment system is designed to protect important relationships. When one ends, the mind and body naturally protest that loss before they slowly learn that safety can exist again. And what many people never see is that this difficult middle chapter often becomes the foundation for an entirely different kind of life. The woman who once feared being alone may slowly discover that solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. The woman who constantly questioned her worth may begin noticing that her value was never meant to depend on someone else's ability to recognize it. Those discoveries don't wait as wreaths the heartbreak, but they can quietly transform the person who lived through it. As those small discoveries begin to accumulate, something else starts to change. The emotional energy that was once spent trying to save the relationship gradually becomes available for something new. At first, many women don't even notice it. They simply realize they're making decisions based on what feels right instead of what might prevent another argument. They laugh without immediately wondering if someone will judge them. They make plans without asking for permission. These moments seem ordinary, but psychologically, They're often signs that a person's sense of self is becoming stronger and more secure. This is especially meaningful for women who spent years in relationships where emotional needs were overlooked. Attachment theory doesn't suggest that every divorce is caused by insecure attachment, nor does it place blame on one partner. Relationships are shaped by countless factors, including stress, communication, compatibility, life circumstances, and individual histories. But when someone repeatedly feels unseen, unheard, or emotionally unsafe, their attachment system can remain in a constant state of alert. Living that way is exhausting, even if they don't realize it at the time. Imagine someone who learned early in life that expressing sadness would be ignored or criticized. As an adult, she may become incredibly skilled at hiding her feelings. During marriage, she might convince herself that staying quiet is the best way to avoid conflict. From the outside, she appears calm and easygoing. Inside, she's carrying years of unmet emotional needs. Divorce doesn't kill, it simply removes the distractions that once kept them buried. That can feel frightening at first. Without the routines of married life, unresolved emotions often rise to the surface. Many women mistake this for moving backward. They think, I thought I was doing better. Why am I crying again? But healing doesn't mean never feeling pain. In psychology, emotional recovery is rarely a straight line. Progress often looks like returning to the same emotions with greater understanding and more self-compassion each time. Over time, many women begin noticing patterns they couldn't see before. They remember the moments when they apologized for things that weren't their fault. They remember dismissing their intuition because they were afraid of losing the allure. They remember shrinking parts of themselves just to keep everything stable. These memories aren't meant to create resentment. They have opportunities to understand how attachment patterns quietly shaped everyday decisions. One of the most powerful changes happens when a woman stops viewing herself through the eyes of the relationship. Instead of asking whether she was enough for someone else, she begins asking whether the relationship allowed her to be fully herself. That's a completely different question. It's no longer about earning love. It's about recognizing what healthy love actually feels like. Psychologists often describe secure relationships as places where people can be authentic without constantly fearing rejection. They don't eliminate conflict or disappointment, but they create enough emotional safety for honesty, repair, and mutual respect. After divorce, many women realize they had become so accustomed to emotional uncertainty that they forgot what genuine security even looked like. And once they experience greater emotional stability within themselves, they become far less willing to settle for relationships built on anxiety, unpredictability, or constant self-sacrifice. This transformation isn't about becoming emotionally distant or deciding never to love again. In many cases, it's the opposite. As attachment becomes more secure, women often become more open, more emotionally available, and more capable of forming healthy, balanced connections. The difference is that they no longer believe love requires abandoning themselves, and that single realization begins to change not only how they see future relationships, but how they see their own worth. That growing sense of worth is often the quiet transformation that other people notice before the woman herself does. Friends may comment that she seems more peaceful. Family members might say she looks happier, even if nothing dramatic has changed on the outside. The biggest difference isn't always a new career, a new relationship, or a completely different life. It's the way she carries herself. She no longer feels the constant pressure to prove that she's lovable because she's beginning to believe that her value was never dependent on someone else's decision to stay. This is one of the most important ideas in attachment theory. Secure attachment isn't about finding the perfect partner who never disappoints you. It's about developing an internal sense of safety that allows you to stay connected to yourself, even when relationships become difficult. Divorce can be an incredibly painful experience, but for some women, it becomes the moment they finally begin building that inner security instead of searching for it exclusively in a place else. And that doesn't mean they stop grieving. There may still be days when old memories return unexpectedly. An anniversary comes around. A family photo appears while cleaning a closet. They hear a song that instantly transports them back to a different chapter of life. Those moments don't mean healing has failed. They simply remind us that meaningful relationships leave lasting emotional footprints. Recovery isn't measured by forgetting the past. It's measured by how gently and honestly someone can carry it. As women become more aware of their attachment patterns, many also begin changing the relationships beyond romance. They become more comfortable setting healthy boundaries with friends, family members, and coworkers. They recognize when they're overextending themselves to earn approval. They become better at expressing their needs without feeling guilty. These changes may seem small, but together they create a life that feels far more authentic than the one they left behind. Interestingly, Researchers who study resilience have found that many people report positive psychological growth after highly challenging life experiences. This doesn't mean trauma or loss is desirable. It means that when people receive support, reflect on their experiences, and gradually rebuild their lives, they sometimes discover strengths, values, and perspectives they never knew they possessed. Divorce can become one of those moments, not because it was easy, but because it forced a deeper relationship with themselves. Eventually, the question changes. At the beginning, many women ask, "Why did this happen to me?" Later, they begin asking, "What have I learned about myself because this happened?" That shift doesn't erase the sadness, but it transforms the meaning of the experience. Instead of seeing divorce as the end of their identity, they begin seeing it as the beginning of a more honest one. If you've experienced divorce, or if you're walking through that uncertainty right now, remember this: your attachment patterns are not your destiny. They are adaptations shaped by experiences, and like many adaptations, they can evolve. With self-awareness, supportive relationships, and patience, it's possible to build a stronger sense of emotional security than you've ever known before. So perhaps the most remarkable thing about these women isn't that divorce didn't break them. It's that they allowed one of life's hardest experiences to reveal parts of themselves that had been hidden beneath fear, self-doubt, and survival. They didn't become stronger because they never struggled. They became stronger because they faced those struggles with honesty, compassion, and the courage to grow. If this perspective resonated with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Your story may encourage someone who feels alone today. And if you enjoy thoughtful conversations about attachment theory, relationship psychology, and emotional healing, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and watch the next video, where we'll continue exploring the hidden patterns that shape the way we love, connect, and heal. One of the biggest misconceptions about healing after divorce is that growth happens because time passes. But time alone doesn't transform people. What transforms people is what they do with that time. Some spend years trying to recreate the life they lost, hoping that another relationship will finally erase the pain. Others become curious instead of judgmental. They begin noticing their emotional reactions without immediately criticizing themselves. They ask difficult questions with compassion rather than shame. And according to relationship psychology, that curiosity is often where genuine healing begins. For women with anxious attachment, this journey may involve learning that love doesn't have to feel uncertain to be meaningful. They may have spent years believing that constantly worrying about the relationship was proof of how deeply they cared. Over time, they discover that healthy love doesn't require endless reassurance or the fear of being abandoned every time conflict appears. Emotional closeness can exist alongside independence, and disagreement doesn't automatically mean rejection. For women with avoidant attachment, the transformation can look very different. Divorce may reveal just how much emotional distance they learned to create in order to protect themselves. They may realize that independence became a shield against vulnerability, not simply a personality trait. As they gradually feel safer with their own emotions, they often become more comfortable, allowing trusted people into their inner world instead of carrying every burden alone. Women with more fearful or disorganized attachment may recognize parts of both experiences. They may long for deep connection while simultaneously fearing it. They may move toward intimacy one moment and away from it the next, confused by their own reactions. Understanding these patterns doesn't excuse unhealthy behavior, but it replaces harsh self-judgment with understanding. When people recognize that these responses developed as ways of adapting to earlier experiences, change becomes much more possible. This is why self-compassion matters so much. Research consistently shows that treating ourselves with kindness during difficult experiences supports emotional resilience more effectively than relentless self-criticism. That doesn't mean avoiding responsibility. It means recognizing that growth happens more easily when people feel safe enough to learn instead of constantly feeling punished for their mistakes. Eventually, something remarkable begins to happen. The woman who once measured every decision against someone else's expectations starts trusting her own judgment again. She notices red flags sooner. She communicates more honestly. She becomes less interested in relationships that require her to shrink herself and more interested in connections built on mutual respect, emotional safety, and genuine partnership. Perhaps that's why some women seem so different after divorce. From the outside, people assume they've simply moved on. But what's really changed is much deeper. They've developed a relationship with themselves that no longer depends on external validation. Their confidence isn't built on pretending they're never afraid. It's built on knowing they can face uncertainty without abandoning themselves. And maybe that's the most hopeful message attachment theory offers. Our earliest experiences may influence us, but they don't have to define the rest of our lives. Every healthy boundary, every honest conversation, every act of self-respect and every emotionally safe relationship becomes another opportunity to strengthen a more secure way of relating to others and to ourselves. So if you're standing at the edge of a new chapter after divorce, remember this: the end of one relationship does not determine the value of your life or the depth of your future. Happiness. Sometimes the greatest transformation begins the moment you stop asking how to become enough for someone else and start realizing you were always enough to begin with. And from that place of security, self-awareness, and hope, a new story can finally begin, one that's written not by fear, but by the person you've become. And when that new story begins, it rarely looks dramatic at first. There isn't always a single morning when a woman wakes up and suddenly feels completely healed. More often, healing arrives quietly. It shows up in the moments when she says no without apologizing, when she enjoys a peaceful evening alone instead of fearing loneliness, when she catches herself smiling without feeling guilty for moving forward. These moments may seem insignificant, but together they represent something profound. Her nervous system is beginning to believe that safety no longer depends on keeping someone else close at any cost. This is what makes transformation so different from simply surviving. Survival is about getting through each day. Transformation is about gradually creating a life that reflects who you truly are rather than as who you thought you had to be. Attachment theory reminds us that secure people aren't fearless. They still experience disappointment, conflict, and loss. The difference is that those experiences no longer define their entire identity. They can feel pain without believing they are broken. They can miss someone without believing they are incomplete. Perhaps that's why the strongest women after divorce aren't necessarily the ones who never cry or never look back. They're the ones who allow themselves to grieve honestly while continuing to move toward a healthier future. They don't rush the process or pretend everything is fine. They accept that healing is messy, that some days will feel heavier than others, and that progress is often measured in small emotional shifts rather than dramatic breakthroughs. As months turn into years, many of these women discover something unexpected. The qualities they were searching for in another person: acceptance, stability, compassion, patience, and understanding have slowly become qualities they now offer themselves. That inner relationship becomes the foundation for every future connection. Instead of asking, "Will this person choose me?" they begin asking, "Can we create a relationship where both of us feel emotionally safe, respected, and valued?" That simple shift changes everything because it places mutual well-being above fear of abandonment. It's also important to remember that healing doesn't always mean finding another romantic partner. For some women, transformation leads to a fulfilling new relationship. For others, it leads to a life rich with meaningful friendships, stronger family bonds, purposeful work, creative passions, and a deeper connection with themselves. Attachment theory isn't about convincing everyone to pursue romance again. It's about helping people build secure, healthy connections in every part of life, including the relationship they have with themselves. So if you're watching this while carrying the weight of a divorce, know this: what you're feeling today doesn't have to predict how you'll feel forever. Your attachment patterns may explain some of your reactions, but they do not imprison your future. Human beings have an extraordinary capacity to adapt, heal, and grow when they're given understanding, support, and time. Every small step towards self-awareness, every healthy boundary, and every act of self-compassion is evidence that your story is still unfolding. One day, you may look back at this chapter not as the moment your life fell apart, but as the moment you finally stopped living according to fear and started living according to truth. The marriage may have ended, but your ability to love, trust, and build meaningful relationships did not end with it. In many cases, it became wiser, healthier, and more intentional than ever before. If this video helped you see divorce and healing from a new perspective, we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts or experiences in the comments. Your story may remind someone else that they're not alone. And if you enjoy thoughtful conversations about attachment theory, relationship psychology, and emotional growth, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Thank you for watching, take good care of yourself, and be sure to watch the next video where we'll continue exploring the hidden psychological patterns that shape the way we love, heal, and become the people we were always capable of being.